from the heart of America. I'm Steve Gruber, your soldier of truth. I am the tip of the spear against all invaders, foreign and domestic. Here ready to fight for you from the foxhole of freedom. And please, my friends, remember, think while it is still legal. This is the Steve Gruber Show. Here are three big things you need to know right now. Number one, oil prices heading to the highest point in a year, which will impact the price of gas every day now for the days to come, which of course impacts you. Number two, political prosecutions have hit a new low as the leader of the fringe group, the Proud Boys, gets 22 years in prison for January the 6th. He wasn't even there. He was already in jail. This is scary. Number three, speaking of being scared, that is exactly what the Biden administration seems to want. They want you to be scared to death, and they want you to be the ones to tell you when to be scared, what to be scared of. But far more importantly, they want to tell you what you can and cannot do, especially if you're scared. And make no mistake, they are far more interested in taking control of what is going on. And they are peddling this fear-mongering propaganda every single day from every place they possibly can, so they can be broadcast on as many TV stations, radio stations, blogs, podcasts, live, taped, streaming, doesn't matter. They're like the modern Tokyo Roses out there. They want to get inside your head every time they possibly can. And they want you worried. They want you worried about a host of things. Things that they will then tell you only we, the elite, powerful leaders of government, can solve these problems for you. But you must never trust completely and never question us. Never question us, because if you do, we will smear you as a purveyor of misinformation and disinformation. Have you canceled? The fear-mongering list from Joe Biden and his team is really quite something. And Jake Sullivan, he put it together for us. He says we should spend lots of money, just not on America. Listen to this.
This is an affirmative agenda. It is an agenda about providing high standards, transparent, sustainable, resilient funding streams to countries that cut through the red tape and give not just the poorest countries in the world, but middle-income countries who are dealing with the stresses of climate and COVID and migration and the war in Ukraine, access to capital that they can actually take advantage of and put to work. That's not against anybody. That is not a negative agenda. That is an affirmative agenda, positive agenda, and one that's been embraced not just by the United States, not just by our closest allies, but by a very wide range and diverse set of countries. And we believe it will be embraced by the G20 as a whole when we go to New Delhi.
So we need you to be afraid of climate, COVID, the border, Ukraine. Just a quick short list. There he is, Jake Sullivan, giving you the laundry list of what you should fear. Of course, they failed to mention the real threats to America, which include, first and foremost, people like Jake Sullivan and his ilk, who do not care about the U.S. Constitution or the fact that they have a fundamental misunderstanding of how America works. You see, these people actually think we work for them and not the other way around, which is really strange. Also quite predictable. I mean, Congress kept ceding power to the bureaucrats, staffers, lobbyists, and a whole host of swamp dwellers. As a result, we, the people, get screwed. They think that they're in charge of us. They've got it 180 degrees out of phase. The other existential threats to America that Jake forgot to mention are the rabid, that is, anti-socialist, anti-Americans who call themselves liberals but really are not liberals at all and are, in fact, the very fascists they claim to oppose. Bill Maher, Joe Rogan, both hammering on the far left, the insanity of modern-day socialists. Maher says the Democrats are very much like the Ku Klux Klan, which, of course, is where Democrats reinvented themselves in 1871. Here's a good conversation to listen to. Roll it.
Every liberal kind of has to be a leftist. It's not if you want to be on the team, you got to subscribe to the most fringe ideas that the team is promoting.
You can be woke with all the nonsense that now implies, but don't say that somehow it's an extension of liberalism.
Right.
Because it's most often actually an undoing of liberalism. I have always believed, as liberals do, for example, in a colorblind society, that the goal is to not see race at all anywhere for any reason.
Yes.
That's what liberals always believed all the way through Obama, going back, Kennedy, everybody, Martin Luther King. That's not what the woke believe. They believe race is first and foremost the thing you should always see everywhere, which I find interesting because that used to be the position of the Ku Klux Klan, that we see race first and foremost everywhere.
Yeah.
So, again, you can have that position, but don't say that's a liberal position. You're doing something very different.
You're doing something very different. Isn't it interesting how he says it's the Klan that used to behave that way? If you see race first and foremost, it's the first thing you see when you look out across the world. Race, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever it is. The other threats include the economy and the wide-open southern border that is allowing millions of unvetted illegals to be unleashed in our nation. But, of course, none of those things fit the narrative, so the Democrats and the globalists are coming back to the playbook of the pandemic. And they're doing their level best to gin up fear over some tiny spike in COVID cases that magically coincides with a brand new Pfizer booster shot that magically comes out in just a few days. It's incredible, isn't it? It is time to really gin up the COVIDians. Cue the masked Nazi Karens. They'll be demanding you and your 2-year-old mask up or they'll scream for your arrest. Ah, yes, the good old days. But remember, there have been medical professionals telling us for years now that the COVID pandemic was overstated and our response was woefully inadequate. They told us masks didn't work, and neither did the so-called vaccines. But instead of getting a platform to discuss their professional medical opinions, they were canceled on social media, made fun of on CNN and MSNBC, while the rest of the nation was being herded like sheep. They were being into unproven, ineffective, and potentially very dangerous injections. That's what happened. But here, memory lane. America's frontline doctors telling us late 2020 what the protocol for COVID was doing. It was killing us. Listen.
Thank you, Simone. I'm Dr. Richard Urso, and I'm a board-certified ophthalmologist, and I'm part of America's frontline doctors. And I got involved because early on in this pandemic, I realized that we had treatment for this virus. Now, my background's in drug development, and I've repurposed drugs for use on the eye, 8 different drugs, and I actually developed a drug that's been patented and made it through the FDA. So I looked carefully at this, and I could not believe that we were going to let patients go without treatment, die, get on ECMO and ventilators. It made no sense right from the very beginning. Anybody who said that this made sense at the very beginning to lock down, it never made sense. It was clear that we had treatment.
It was clear that we had treatments. We didn't use them. We sent sick people home, said if you get really sick, come back to the hospital, which they did. And then they were put on ventilators that were a death sentence. According to all the numbers I've seen, the survival rate on ventilators was less than 10%. Less than 10%. I've got more from Dr. Urso and everyone else as we dig into this fear-mongering, return of the pandemic protocols. After the break, good to see you here. It's the Steve Gruber Show.